So in this little video on Ketron Event, I'm going to take you through the process of creating a multi-layered user voice. Sounds complex, but actually it really is the key to Ketron. And anybody buying a Ketron, I would urge you that one of the first things you learn how to do on this is the process that I'm about to show you. And you spend a little bit of time creating a good number of what we're going to call user voices, because then the Ketron becomes tailored to your needs right from the word go, and you will constantly then have access to your favorite mixes of sounds and the type of sounds that you want. Now, on other videos, I'm sure you've watched them before and you've heard me wax lyrical about the fact that on a Ketron you can layer up to 6 orchestral sounds together, and even then you can still add the organ sound to it if you want. And we've talked about hence being able to layer up to 7 voices together. Now, a user voice, a single user voice, can be anything up to 3 voices layered together. So a lot of people say, well, if that's 3 voices, where do you get the 7 sounds from? Once you've created a user voice, you can load a user voice into voice 1, and bear in mind that can be 3 layered sounds. You can load another user voice into voice 2. That could be another 3 layered voice. So there are your 6 orchestral voices if you have both voices on. And then you can introduce the drawbar as well. But we're just looking at how to create something, in this case, which is 3 voices layered together. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to create an orchestral sound here, based with a string sort of foundation, and then we're going to add some horns to it as well. So I'm going to start with a string sound, and it doesn't matter which string sound you start with, but try and find something that is very similar to the end result you're trying to achieve. So I'm going to go for this one sound called ensemble. Now at this point, I can't see visibly anywhere. I can see it's going to play on voice 1. What I can't see is, I don't know whether that's 1 sound, 2 sounds layered together, or 3 sounds. But how I find that out is we tap the name of the voice at the top again, and we go into our 7 pages of voice setting menu. Now, I can see immediately there is only 1 section switched on, and that's our first layer, and it is a voice called ensemble. So that is a single sample. So how would I create a layer of 3 sounds? Well, the next thing I do is switch layer 2 on. Now, I don't want fat strings. I actually want that same ensemble sound. So exit. So I've got the same sound together. You can probably hear something strange going on there, and we've talked about this on other products. When you mix the same sample together at the same octave, you get this sort of phasing effect, which is genuinely not that pleasant, and it's not what I want. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to octave shift one of those voices, and that will solve that problem. I'm actually going to take our first voice down 12. Remember, that's 12 semitones, so that's an octave. And now we've created a very strong octave string sound, and we've eliminated the phasing there. If we come a bit further across, we've now got a pan control. So I'm going to pan those deeper strings to the left. So I can afford to take it right to sort of 50, 60 to the left. The higher strings, I'm going to turn to the right, and I'm going to take it a similar amount to the right. Now, you probably won't be able to hear this effect on the device you're listening to this on, but as I'm sitting here now with stereo speakers, I can clearly hear the deep strings coming from one side and the high strings from the other side. I'm going to be really fussy now. I'm going to go into this tuning section, and I'm just going to detune them very, very slightly, because we've talked about this before. When you have a whole string section, whilst they will have all tuned up before they start, they never actually are all absolutely perfectly in tune all the way through, and it's this very, very subtle detuning that naturally happens that actually gives these ensemble string sounds their character. So there we go, we've done that a little bit. So what am I going to put in number 3, layer 3? Well, I said I wanted some horns, so I will go into my brass section, and actually that's exactly the sound I want, horn crescendo. There we go, I can hear that now. If you didn't hear those horns at that point, don't panic. If you go through to page 5, sometimes a voice is assigned as a second voice, and if this underneath is set to coupling, depending where your articulation button on, because I've assigned it to this articulation button, you may not hear that horn straight away, but when you press this, in come the horns there. Now we could try, I wonder what the horns would sound like if we knock them down an octave. Yeah, you know what, I like that, but I think they're a little bit loud, so I'm just going to knock the volume back in the mix. Now, let's go back to that page 5. I often choose to make the third layer what they call a second voice. That sounds a bit contradictory, but a second voice means it's there, it's ready, and we can bring it in depending whether we assign it to the modulation wheel, the articulation, you can assign it to aftertouch. Why do I do that? Because it means I've effectively got 2 sounds for the price of 1. So when I first select this sound, I can just have that nice octave string. But when I want to really build it up, and I can bring my horns in. So what I would do when I'm going to save it as a user voice, don't have the third sound on, but make sure you have got that assigned as a second voice. Coupling just means it's going to couple with the other sounds. In other words, it's going to add to the other sounds. And I've assigned it to my articulation toggle button there. So at this point, what I would do is save that sound. And this is a great 3-layered sound. Save voice ensemble. Well, we can rename that in a minute. I am going to save it in the string section because although it's got the horns in, it's got a very much a string foundation. So what I need to do, I need to go through. Now you may find I've already saved this, so I'm going to keep going until I find, there we go, a slot that says empty. Make sure you find an empty slot, otherwise you're going to overwrite a sound that's already there. Save as. You need to give it a name. If you just press save, it will save it as ensemble. And you don't know the difference between that. So this time, I'm going to put str for octave string. And then I might put, what shall we have? The colon. And then I'll put horn. Now, whenever I put the colon, it means that's a second voice. So it's octave strings, and in second voice, I've got a horn. That is my system. So I'm going to press enter. And that has now saved that sound. Now, although we've spent 5 minutes creating it, that sound is now there forever and a day in your keyboard. So whenever you want to do a setup using that sound, it's there. You haven't got to find it again. It's very, very similar to the idea of keyboard sets on a Korg keyboard if you have a Korg. Where do we find it? We go into user and we go through, and there it is, octave string and horn. And like I said, two sounds for the price of one, really, because when we first select it, we've got our octave string sound. When we press our articulation button, and there's our three-layered sound. Imagine now making another three-layered orchestral sound, maybe with some woodwinds, maybe a bit of choir in, and mixing that together with it in voice 2, and that's when you get these really massive, expansive sounds. So hopefully you can see the concept. That's in an orchestral vein. You might do a piano and string mix. You might do some different organ mixes. You might do some nice acoustic guitars, some with strings, some with pads. Create these user voices so that you build up this library of your own sounds. So that's how we actually create our own multi-layered sounds and save them in the user voices.
Keyboard world, oh, keyboard world.